She's written for New York Magazine and Salon, and she's a regular contributor for Bust Magazine. I'm thrilled to have her back. Please give it up for Johanna Gohmann.
So I grew up in Indiana with 6 brothers and a sister. And one of the things about growing up in a large family is you kind of learn to always exist in sort of this like low level of chaos. Like even the most mundane activity, there's just sort of like this primal frenzy to it. Like just like eating dinner, like there's like a hint of like, you know, nature program to it. Like which of these animals will come out alive. And some of my most vivid childhood memories are actually like mealtime with my family. My dad actually used to love to take us out, though to cut costs, he would take us to these like really disgusting like hangouts for the geriatric. Like they would be like the Blue Boar or the Wagon Wheel. And it was like basically if there was like an ambrosia salad on a buffet with a hare in it, like we were regulars. So, and we hated it. And my dad actually thought it was hilarious that we hated it. Like my dad, he had this really big personality and he had a really weird kind of funny sense of humor. Like once when we were kids, he told us that Ronald Reagan had canceled summer vacation because we hadn't learned enough that year. And after like letting us spend the day like raging at the gods, then he was like, just kidding. So he would take us to these buffets and be like, want more ham salad? And then just like laugh at our disgust. Like it was very weird. But there was one place that we actually went to so often that they put us in the commercial. And I'm serious. And it's like my family like sitting and we're all wearing like patterned sweaters and like smiling and like eating popcorn shrimp. When in reality, like moments before the cameras rolled, like someone had like knocked over their Coke and like somebody else had this big snot explosion and my mom was screaming. But in like the commercial for Tommy Lancaster's restaurant, we're all like, just like dining. And there was this other place that we went to where, I guess in an attempt to lure in diners under 80, they filled the area with helium balloons like on strings. So like when my siblings and I would leave, we would just like grab fistfuls of these balloons and walk out with them. And there were 8 of us. So like we would just like clear this room of helium balloons and we would tie them all together to the back of our van and drive home that way. And we did this one Sunday, and I remember we were getting ready to leave, and like this like furious dad comes out with his like crying 6-year-old, and he's like, "You people, you piggied up all the balloons." My dad's like, "Beep beep," and like guns it out with like the balloons like, "Woo!" So, but I mean, it didn't matter if we were dining out or if we were dining at home. It didn't matter if it was like a formal occasion like Thanksgiving. Like we could be sitting in like our church clothes. My mom would invite, you know, Father Jerry, the family priest, over to dine with us. And shit would still go down. Like I remember one Thanksgiving, someone folded up a piece of pizza and tucked it into one of my brother's milk glasses. And this was a brother who had like a notoriously weak stomach. And so he's like taking a drink, and like the second the pizza hits his mouth, he's just like, bah! It's like barfs all over the table. You'd think like having a man of God at the table with us might curtail our desire to make Teddy barf, but you'd be wrong. You also might think that as we got older, the tenor of our dinners would change, but actually no. In fact, one of my most bizarre Thanksgivings actually happened last year. My husband and I and our 3-year-old, we drove 14 hours to Indiana, which sounds just as magical as you might think. And like we get there and it's like the tone is already just like weird. Like my mom has the flu. She's like, "I'm sick," but like she's still insisting on fixing the entire dinner. So she's just like baking her swine flu like into the bird. And then there was like a tornado warning in like November, and like the grandkids were all going crazy. But on top of it being Thanksgiving, it was also my parents' 49th wedding anniversary, which normally would be a happy occasion, but my dad actually has Alzheimer's now. And he's in the late stages, and he's in a wheelchair, and he can't really talk anymore. And my mom has kept him home with her, and she's cared for him. Like, she's been his primary caretaker throughout the illness, and it's been amazing. But like while we were happy to have another Thanksgiving with my dad, like the thing with Alzheimer's is the person is there, but they're also not there, you know? And my dad was like always such this like huge force in our family. And now that's gone. And we were all sort of just like coping with our sadness in our own way. And one of my brothers his way of coping at the dinner was to drink an entire bottle of whiskey and then to just act like a complete maniac. Like, he was basically just being like, I'm gonna be so loud, no one will be sad. And like, at one point, he actually went outside with a broomstick and was like, watch this, and just like shattered my mom's wind chimes. Like, it was seriously, like, it was just bananas. And like, the party just keeps getting louder and louder, and like, I look around and I see that my mom and my dad have kind of disappeared, and so I'm like, go look for them, and they're in the library where my dad sleeps now, and they're sitting in the dark, holding hands, watching No Country for Old Men. Yes. And I'm like, do you guys maybe want me to put on like a rom-com, like something with Meg Ryan, And my mom's like, no, we like this movie. So I just sat with them, and we watched Javier Bardem kill people with a cattle gun, and then that was Thanksgiving. So the next day, things are like a little less stressful. Like a lot of my siblings, they went home with their kids, but it was still like my own kid was acting crazy, and my mom was still sick, but she was still insisting on fixing this like big dinner. And that night, it was going to be bacon wrapped steaks, and just like all I wanted to do was just sit down and like have dinner and a glass of wine and relax and like finally get my kid to bed. And the moment has come, and if anyone has like a small kid, you know that when you finally get a chance to eat, you kind of eat like a starved wolfhound. Like you just like shove everything in your face at once, which is what I did. And so like I'm sitting there and I feel something sharp in my mouth. And this will sort of like tell you my mental state at the time. I'm like, oh, it's probably just a bone. And I just swallow it. You know how you just swallow steak bones? So then I look down at my plate and I realize that what I've done, I've actually swallowed like a really big piece of a wooden toothpick. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, that's probably not good. So I turned to everyone's most trusted medical resource, Google. And Google, of course, is like, holy shit, you're gonna die. Like, you should be at the ER now. So my husband like stays home with our kid, and my brother and his born-again Christian girlfriend, they take me to the ER, and she's like praying over my stomach for Jesus to like come and like dissolve the toothpick, and which was actually, it was very sweet. Like I did appreciate it, but it just was not how I saw my relaxing evening unfolding. So finally like this doctor comes in, and he has this like sort of like halted, like nervous way of talking, which is not what you want in an ER doctor. Like he's like, so I think you're gonna, yes, be okay. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, so he's like, it could puncture an internal organ and you could die an excruciating death, or you could just pass it. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, so you can just go home, and if you think you're dying of sepsis, call us. Now, I have some hypochondriac tendencies, so I wanted a little more to hang my hat on. Like, I once got a CAT scan because I left some crushed white strips on too long, and it made my head feel weird. So I was like, I need a bit more than this. But they were like, just go home. But then they were like, oh, but if you do pass it, you likely won't know, so you shouldn't go looking for it. Which was good, because like fecal search was not on my holiday itinerary. I was like, okay. So I go home and I like go up to, we're sleeping in my parents' bedroom, which was also just weird. So like I'm up there with my husband and our son, and like my parents are sleeping downstairs, and now I'm like sleeping in this room where I used to go as a kid when I was frightened, but like now I'm the parent, but I'm freaked out, and like I'm like, this the same wallpaper that used to creep me out as a kid, because like the design, I thought the profile looked like E.T. when he was dying. It used to like scare the shit out of me. So I'm just like laying there, and I can kind of like feel just like all of the stress and tension and sadness of the weekend is just like clenched in my stomach around the toothpick. And I can kind of feel myself kind of unraveling a little bit, like kind of falling apart. And then in the darkness, I see my son sit up, and he turns to me and he says something he's never said to me before. He turns to me and he says, "It's okay, Mama." Now, he has had no idea. Like, he missed the whole mommy swallowing foreign object portion of the evening. Like, he was asleep. But he clearly, like, he sensed my distress, and he was trying to calm me down. And hearing his little voice say that, I was just, like, flooded with calm. And I realized that I needed to pull myself together, not just for myself, but for him, because that's what you do for your kids. And if I've learned anything from my parents in their 49 years of marriage, it's that when things get scary, you stay brave and you do whatever you need to do for the people who need you, including push out a toothpick, which I did. Thank you.
Yum's the word